I expect you boys to go out there and not take this team lightly, because I promise you, they're going to come at you with everything they've got. I expect you boys to execute.
Yes, sir.
Expect you boys to play football.
Yes, sir.
Clear eyes, full hearts, can't lose.
Three Films and a Podcast has no claim of ownership on any film footage used in this episode. All film footage is owned in its entirety by the copyright holders and is used solely with the intent of film criticism, commentary, and education under fair use law. And just like every car in Too Fast, Too Furious, this podcast contains spoilers. Enjoy.
Hello and welcome back to Three Films and a Podcast, the show where destiny has once again put us together for another episode. I am Matt Weiler. I'm down here in Pleasant Grove, Utah. We've got up the road Ben Lawhorn in Salt Lake City.
Texas forever.
And up in the great Pacific Northwest, Portland, Oregon, we have Tyler Beck.
Clear eyes and full hearts, everyone. When you did that, I was like, what's a McNulty thing? What's a McNulty? But I couldn't think of a McNulty thing to say, so I had to go the other Tim Riggins.
Classic.
Double Riggins.
Classic Friday Night Lights.
Double Riggins.
Quick aside, I worked for a photography company in Texas for a while, and they had a slogan for a while that was clear lenses, full memory cards, or something along those lines. It's pretty awesome.
It's a stretch.
Yeah,
it
was a stretch, but it sort of matched the quirkiness of the studio.
Yeah.
It was fun.
No, it's great. I love it. For those of you who are new to the show, we're basically just three friends who had started a movie club back in the beginning of 2020. We actually talked about it in 2019. What started as sort of like more of a group thread of conversations about the movies we were watching. We decided, you know what, let's expand this. Let's bring more people on watching these movies with us. And so we decided to start a podcast. And almost a year later, here we are. We've got several episodes that you can find, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Our favorite way to consume this is over YouTube. And yeah, just give us a listen anywhere. And in the nature of building a community around Movie Club, we really want to branch out. And so one of our ways of doing that is by having a guest on as many episodes as we can. And we are lucky enough to have Christian on with us today.
Hello.
Christian, if you want to talk about your podcast and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I am from outside Chicago, and I host the Movie Pit podcast, where I round up all of the, that's not the right word to use, I'm an English major, I should know that. I put together all of the movie news of the week, movie trailers that came out during the week, and the movies that are coming out at the end of the week, which was not the case all last year because of this little thing called what was it called? COVID. That's right.
What was that thing?
Oh, that old kerfuffle.
that old little thing. But it's coming back, so I'm kind of doing that back into the podcast. But I give all the movie news and stuff like that, give my opinions. Every now and then I do a review. I don't do them as much or as often as I should, but I do them every now and then. And, yeah, you can find the podcast on YouTube, on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and Spotify.
I mean, yeah, you just did your Black Widow review, which I thought was awesome. Honestly, like I have like so much respect for anyone that does a one-person pod because, well, it might be easier in a sense. For me, that just sounds like a nightmare. Like I feel like half the time I show up with just like my ass in my hand, not knowing what to do. So I'm glad that I have two other people here to like save me. So I can't imagine doing it all by myself, but I think you do a great job. I love the pod.
Thank you. I appreciate that. But I don't know. I mean, 5 years by myself, just, speaking into the void of the internet. I mean, that's not bad, right?
Yeah, I love it.
There's worse ways to spend your time, that's for sure.
Exactly.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. We're absolutely thrilled to have you with us today. And speaking of segments, every time I host, there's a little thing that I like to do for our listeners. I go through this exercise. So some of you have listened to people, doing like therapy on tape or hypnosis on tape. This is kind of like that. And I invite the
Only
audience, listeners, wherever you are, to please close your eyes. If you're driving, that's okay. Just close them for a second. This won't take long. But please, just to set yourself up. And we're gonna hit the rewind button. We're gonna be kind. We're gonna rewind back to February 2012. And you're a big Wes Anderson fan, but you know what? You've already seen Moonrise Kingdom. You're not in the mood for that anyway. You're in the mood for action. And Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson is in Journey to the Center of the Earth 2. But Dwayne has too much of a pull, and tickets are completely sold out.
Ugh.
So you decide to settle for another adventure that caught your eye. Something otherworldly, featuring a white guy swinging around a chain. No, I'm not talking about Ghost Rider Spirit of Vengeance. I'm talking about one of the biggest bombs ever dropped in a theater. No, this is not Lone Ranger. This is 1 year too early for that. I got to start over that part. I'm sorry. The delivery is just so garbage. Okay.
I love it.
One more time.
This is by far my favorite one you've done, by the way.
Yeah, this is
I decided I'm gonna stop reading what it says. I might just like try to delete it from my personal instance of the Drive doc, because I literally want to close my eyes and react to what you're
just
saying.
enjoy it.
All right.
Anyways,
yeah,
sorry.
you should.
I'll
Sorry.
do that next time.
Okay. You decide to settle for another adventure that caught your eye. Something otherworldly featuring a white guy swinging around a chain. And no, I'm not talking about Ghost Rider Spirit of Vengeance. I'm talking about one of the biggest bombs ever dropped in a theater. And no, it's not the Lone Ranger. This is a year too early for that. I'm talking about John Carter. So the reason I picked John Carter for this round is, I should rewind a little bit.
Wait a minute. Strike that. Reverse it.
This round is themed around Mars. And the reason why I chose Mars was because I feel like there's a lot of Mars stuff happening, this year. We've got a new rover on Mars. Mars is hip and cool again. Maybe it was never not cool. I don't know. But people are wearing like Mars shirts. It's like, okay.
That goddamn Bezos is gonna bail on us to Mars.
Yeah. He's gonna take him and the billionaires are
Jeff,
booking
like
a
and
trip to
subscribe. We'd
Yeah.
happily promote Amazon for you.
Yeah, Jeff, no offense at all. We'll take.
And if you get on that Patreon, we could probably afford to animate all of Matt's stories.
We have a special Jeff Bezos
It's just
tier
the
just for you.
$1,000 a month. It's nothing to you. Nothing at all.
Shoot! Come on, man! Shoot for the stars. Land in the trees.
You made $1,000 as we said that.
Yeah.
$1,000 a day.
That's fair.
Anyways,
but yeah, Mars. I mean, I like space. Mars is cool, and I feel like in film, over the several decades that we've had, great cinema, Mars has been the backdrop and subject matter of a wide variety of movies. So I wanted to tap into that. I chose John Carter because its source material is pretty unique. It's by Edgar Rice Burroughs, who wrote Tarzan. For those of you who have read Tarzan, everyone's familiar with Tarzan. But this book was written in 1912, or it was released in 1912. So to put that in perspective, Jack and Rose may have had a copy of it on the Titanic. In my headcanon, they were reading it, in one of those scenes.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not gonna lie. When I read this before recording, I was like, "Whoa, really? They had it?" Like I thought it was like in the movie. I thought like James Cameron threw like a nod to the story or something.
I like to think that James Cameron, who did Avatar, has read
man.
John Carter and may have had a prop, John Carter.
I'm not gonna lie, I'm a little upset now. I thought that was like a cool piece of movie trivia.
It's Matt Cannon.
Yeah, I like that. I like Matt Cannon.
Anyway, I mean, John Carter very generally is someone going to another planet and having just like superhuman powers. And if that sounds familiar, this predates Superman by 20 years. So Edgar Rice Burroughs, ahead of his time, writing some of this science fiction that's pretty interesting. But that's not the most interesting part about it. Disney paid a ton for this movie. This is one of the most expensive movies ever made, and it absolutely bombed. They lost. I tried to find a number, and it was like between 100 and 200 million. Just like,
Wow.
they lost
Jeez.
so much money here.
They lost a dinner with Jeff Bezos.
Sorry, Jeff. Maybe
Like and
next time,
subscribe.
Jeff. Yeah. But yeah, so I'll get into that later. I guess my first experience with it, but that's why I chose it. Christian, I want to hear your personal experience with John Carter, viewing this and sort of your perception around it.
So I remember going to the movies and watching this, probably the day after it came out, that Saturday, and I was somewhat familiar with John Carter and the whole series of books. Not a lot, but I was somewhat familiar with that, and so I was kind of excited. I had known that because the very little that I knew, so I knew that George Lucas was inspired by the John Carter series to do Star Wars, and I'm sure we'll probably get into that a little bit later. But so I knew a little bit about John Carter. So I remember when I watched it for the first time, I thought it was okay. I think maybe some of the buzz and the critics around it kind of got to me a little bit, which I hate when that happens because I try to go in as plain as possible. But when I first watched it, I was like, it's fine. And I watched it today, earlier, just to refresh my memory, because I hadn't seen it since it came out all the way back. And it's not that bad. I completely have done a 180 on it. I think I really enjoy that first hour, because that first hour moves very quickly.
Yeah.
By the time I realized that it was already an hour in, and I was like, oh wow, this is okay. And then after that, it kind of slows down a little bit. But overall, I really liked it. I don't know why there's so much kind of hate for it. I think most of it comes from some of the insider stuff, which I think I know we'll get into a little bit later. But overall, I liked it. Like I'm not ashamed to say that I changed my opinion, and the critics got to me back when I was a youthful age of however old I was in 2012. But yeah.
Well,
Nice. Cool.
Christian, you're a man after my own heart, because the boys on the pod here know, and I know you've listened to a few of our episodes, so maybe you know, but I tried to go into everything completely blind. And so if I add that and compound it with the fact that, like, for whatever reason, I had just always avoided this movie, I knew nothing about this. I didn't know John Carter was like, I didn't know the backstory behind the story itself, how old it was. I didn't know any of the industry insider stuff that we'll talk about. And so just like for whatever reason, up until now, I just was not interested, like, at all. And to be honest, like, when Matt nominated it for the podcast, I was just like, Weiler,
You're welcome.
my
You're
nemesis.
welcome, Tyler. There's a lot more where that came from, Tyler.
It wasn't really that bad, but if I'm being honest, I was like, oh man, there's so many movies that I am looking forward to, and I'm just not into it. Like, I just don't care about John Carter. And to be honest, maybe if I knew some of the backstory, I knew that it was like a really old story written a long time ago. If I knew some of the weird insider stuff and like some of the sliding doors things that happened because of this, maybe I would have been more interested. But yeah, and my like just like you, I watched it today. It's my first and only time seeing John Carter, and I liked it. It was fine. Like I didn't have any of that baggage, so there was nothing really to ruin it other than the movie itself, which it tried to do, but it was fine. It was just, to me, it was fine. I thought it was about 30 minutes too long. I feel like kind of like what you said, around the hour mark, it slows down, and then the ending really is really fun. Maybe half an hour less for me would have been great. And it was just like really fun to see Riggins and McNulty doing like cool alien stuff.
Yeah. I think it was fun seeing Riggins like this, because like he is someone who just can't, I don't think he can do a period piece. Like he's just Riggins.
Well, did you see him as David Koresh in that like series about Waco?
Fair enough. I guess like the Riggins hair does not translate to like the Civil War stuff, like just putting a beard on him. It was just
he was trying to
weird.
preserve his brand
where's his
for
beard?
sure.
Yeah. Which,
Where
I
is
mean,
his
I
beard
get
that he loses.
What's that?
The beard that he loses at some
Yeah.
point. I totally missed that he was wearing a beard, and then the next thing I know, he's not. The beard's gone. Wait, did I miss something?
Yeah, they are pretty quick with that, just like in and out. Yeah, this was also my first experience with it. I think just based on like the artwork and stuff, I was essentially planning on like just the Ragnarok Hulk stuff. Essentially, you know, it's like, oh, he's just gonna be like fighting monsters on like a desert island kind of thing. And then I watched the trailer, and then like it starts out just after the Civil War. It's like, what the fuck is going on? Like, did I pick the wrong movie? Like, what is happening here? I had no idea. And then, yeah, it all just happens. I'm like, oh, okay. It's one of those, like, for better or worse, you watch the trailer and I still don't know what I'm getting when I get into it. So I'm like,
Yeah.
all right, let's check it out. So I don't know. I think these kind of things where, you know, maybe if I saw it when it came out, I'd be disappointed. But now with so much time removed and understanding like people's perceptions of it, it's hard to not take that into the movie watching experience. And when it's done, it's just like, it wasn't that bad. Like, I don't understand why people hated it. Like, it was fine. I think that they could have done more. I think that, you know, they talked about it, and we'll talk about it later. It's like, I don't know. It would have been kind of cool. I would have been on board for that. So, I feel like Taylor Kitsch has gotten a rough go after Friday Night Lights, so I want something good for him, and I think this could have been pretty cool. But yeah, I don't know. I didn't think it was that bad. It was fine.
Something I just thought, and Matt, you wrote this in the notes, that it cost about $350 million to make, and it grossed somewhere around $280. And like, to me, it's like, yeah, it's like a $280 million film. It made a lot of money. You know, like if the money they had spent on it was lower, like I feel like this earned its $280 million. Like, it's not, like you said, it's not that bad. It's not $350 million good, but it's not that bad. You know what I mean? So it's a victim of its own circumstance.
Yeah, and see, I had seen it. I had already heard everything about it. Not the story, but I already had not any interest in the movie whatsoever when it came out, and then it bombed, and before it left theaters, I had a buddy, and I still can't remember who recommended it to me. Maybe I made it up, but somebody recommended it to me. If you know who you are, call me and tell me that it was you, because I do not remember who it was.
Old Pat Weiler.
Yes, Pat.
Yeah.
My twin brother.
Evil cousin.
Yeah. I don't know who recommended it, but they got me there. They basically said, like, look, this movie like did so bad that there's no way it's getting a sequel, but it's actually pretty awesome. So I went into it with that, like, okay, it already bombed. We're not getting another one. And so I kind of watched it through the lens of like, oh man, like, this is actually kind of cool, and now we're not going to see, you know, anything else from it. And I lament how poorly that release went. This movie, or I guess I should say the story of John Carter, the rights to it kind of bounced around to different studios and different creative teams tried to tackle it. There was scripts written, full creative teams assembled, and these studios just kept letting it expire just because they just didn't. I don't know the story behind it, but there obviously wasn't too much of a draw. But the most noteworthy, in my opinion, was in 2004, Paramount was able to enlist Jon Favreau to the project. I believe he drafted a script or was collaborating with someone on a script. He was very, insistent on being true to the source material, using practical effects, very much like we know Jon Favreau to do. And Paramount decided, you know what, we're going to focus on the Star Trek train. We're going to reboot Star Trek again, and they let their rights expire. And so I guess the conversation point that I want to draw from that is Favreau left that project and immediately went on to do Iron Man with Marvel. And so had he stayed on that project, the Jon Favreau Marvel project may not have happened, or at least it certainly would have started in 2008. So I guess wanted to pose the question, Christian, to you, like what, with the landscape that was built from Jon Favreau and Iron Man in the cinema that we enjoy today, like what would the last 15 years have looked like had this gone differently?
Yeah, I didn't even realize that Jon Favreau was attached to this at some point. I mean, it's hard to imagine Favreau not doing this and then not going to do Iron Man, which obviously, jump-started a whole new thing. But it's hard to these are the kind of questions where like I always want to answer and I always want to give like a really like cool nerdy answer, and then you ask me and my brain is just like no.
I feel you. No, trust me.
No articulate answer from you.
That's when I just start saying things and I get myself into trouble.
Yeah, and this is what I was talking about earlier. I'm like, I don't know how to end this, so please someone help me out because I don't know what to say. So
that's what you do when you're recording a podcast, especially when you're one person and you just see that line.
Yeah, he's flatlining.
But to answer the question, try to answer the question. If Favreau had stayed on and done this, I think that it probably, I don't know if it would have been as big as Iron Man or as big as, what Iron Man built up to, or, built in. But I think that if he had stayed on and done this and potentially even done Iron Man, it would have made Jon Favreau a bigger go-to name in Hollywood. And would we have a John Carter universe or franchise because of it? I mean, that's a pretty decent question. It all is kind of bleeds into something else, but I don't want to get too far ahead of myself with the answer. But it also would have come down to what the studio would have allowed him to do.
Yeah.
And what Jon Favreau, you said that he wanted to be close to source material. Like, yeah, that works. But, like I mentioned, this was, John Carter has been mined to the very deep end of that cave. And, there's only so much you can recycle before fans, even if it's the thing that the granddaddy of it all, that fans will accept and be like, okay, let's go through this again. So I don't know if he had stayed on, would it have changed cinema? Probably. Yeah. I mean, yeah. I mean, that's the long answer short. Yes. It would have changed. Please, someone else talk because I'm
Yeah, man. For me, it's like, it's hard for me to believe they wouldn't have pursued the comic books. I think it probably would have eventually been the more like traditionally popular comic book characters like Spider-Man or something jumpstarting the MCU. It certainly probably wouldn't have looked the same, but like I can't. It seems to me that it was obvious they wanted, by I just mean like the royal we, like the editorial dude. The studios, I think eventually would have made some sort of comic book universe. And like, I actually really liked the Star Trek reboot and I really liked Iron Man. So it's, like, to me, it's like, I feel like the chips fell like they were supposed to, right? And like, literally the entire time I was watching this movie, and again, I didn't know about the whole Favreau sliding doors thing. I was like, man, this would be so cool if it was made by Marvel. And by that, I mean, like, literally anyone that ever made a movie in the MCU. Like, pick anyone. Like, I feel like Kenneth Branagh would have done it the most like the version we saw here. Like, his adaptation of Thor fits more closely to like what we saw in John Carter. But, give it to any of them. Taika would obviously have a fun spin on it. Whatever. Just pick any of them. And, I feel like, I don't know. And I don't exactly also, I'm rambling completely here, but I wasn't sure who the target demographic for this movie was. And it seems like if I were a kid, I would have liked it a lot more than I do as an old man. So I was just like, I just feel like if this was made by Marvel, it would be targeted towards me and I would really like this story. But it wasn't and it's not. So I'm just kind of like, with it, you know, like it's kind of lukewarm.
Yeah, I feel like there's just no way it doesn't influence cinema, you know, whatever, for the last 15 years with Favreau not directing it. And I just put it more on like what we would have lost with Marvel than what we would have gained with John Carter. Like John Carter's cool. I think it's great. But I mean, obviously Marvel is just like huge. It's insane how big it got and how big it can get.
It's literally unlimited.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think obviously the way it all worked out is the way it was supposed to work out. I was looking at Favreau's IMDb, and like a year later, 2005, after Paramount got the rights in 2004, like he put out Zathura, which is also like a space adventure movie written by the guy who did Jumanji, which was like, obviously you can see some Tarzan stuff there too, you know? So it's like, I wonder if that's kind of why they went to him. Like, hey, maybe Favreau wants to do another space thing or whatever, you know, like a little different. And I have a feeling this will probably come up in a little bit, but it's just so much of it is about the studio that it's at. Because even I think if Disney had Marvel back when Iron Man came out, that wouldn't be the same movie.
Right.
You know, so I think it's all just kind of, I think they proved their point before Disney came in. And so for the most part, I think Disney be like, all right, keep doing what you're doing. We're not going to mess with it too much. But, you know, again, I just talked about Edgar Wright's Ant-Man, and Edgar Wright went to Marvel, I think in like 2004, 2005, wanting to do an Ant-Man movie. So like he'd been wanting to do this forever. So it's just, you know, it's who's behind it. And to Fuzz's point, like what the demographic is, because I'm like, it felt like a kid's movie, but then I don't know, like we see someone pick up one of those green alien people and the shadows of them like breaking them in half. And it's like a lot of purple blood, which is like apparently okay, I guess, if it's purple and not red blood, you know, like I guess that's okay, which is fine. So I don't know, to answer the question that's posed, everything would be different. I think, you know, like I legitimately don't know that we get Endgame. I don't know that we get here yet. Like Feige was around, but Favreau really set the tone. If it's a different director, I don't know, they're getting Robert Downey Jr. You know, there's just all this kind of stuff that goes into it. And, you know, maybe things just get pushed back 2 years. You know, maybe Iron Man comes out in 2010 instead of 2008, you know, and everything continues like it's supposed to, whatever, you know, but if it had gone that way, I don't know. I'm just glad we got what we got, basically.
Yeah. No, I agree wholeheartedly. Yeah, I think Fuzz said it best, that like everything seemed to drop right into the right proper place. Everything happened the way it should have. I think like the MCU, the phenomenon that happened, like starting with Iron Man, just like changed blockbusters, I think, for the better. It elevated everything. And so in order to be a good blockbuster, you had to be smarter, pace it better, tighter writing. You had to be funnier. Like it changed the way the audiences engaged with the blockbuster. Not to say that blockbusters were like horrible before, but like if you go back 20 years and watch the blockbusters of that time, it's like, man, we are getting the good stuff now. Like this is,
I will not hear any slander about Men in Black or Independence Day
or Armageddon. I know, I'm sorry.
Armageddon. We've talked at length. Will Smith owns 2 summers of my life.
Well, I mean, one thing I want to say too, though, I just thought about like if Iron Man came out 2 years later, you know, if it all continued, I think it would have been influenced by Dark Knight, because these both came out the same year. So that's why Iron Man could be its own thing. But I think Marvel may have been like, I don't know, maybe they would have like, again, continued. But after seeing the reception of Dark Knight and how huge that was, like maybe we need to go a little grittier or something like that. And then it changes that way too. So
and it's totally, it would be interesting too, like after Dark Knight becoming such a phenomenon, and you just mentioned like RDJ might not have signed on, but had it been 2 years later, they might have gotten someone who at the time was a more established name and wasn't this like wild card that RDJ was at the time. So like it could have failed because they wanted to shoehorn like, I mean, I love Brad Pitt, but you know what I mean? Just like shoehorning Brad Pitt in as Tony Stark or whatever. Like, I think that.
And they want Tom Cruise?
Yeah.
Did they really?
Honestly.
Oh, see, that would have ruined it. That would be terrible. That's a good call. Yeah. So I think
Tom Cruise, like and subscribe to our podcast, please.
No, I don't abide Scientologists. I'm just kidding.
If you're a Scientologist, please like and subscribe to our podcast. Send your hate mail to Tyler.
The code school I went to is in the Scientologist building downtown Portland.
Oh wow!
So I've
thank you.
I have in some way given them money through whatever rent that code school pays. So they've gotten all they're gonna get from me.
Give it back.
Bring it on, Scientology.
Well, the way I see it working out is that, so let's say Favreau sticks with John Carter, it probably ends up a better movie. It sounds like a lot of what was wrong with this movie, like even in the marketing, was choices made by the director. And so it seems like Favreau's a very safe person to work with when you're trying to put out, a good movie, like business-wise. And I imagine if Paramount stuck with John Carter, that means Star Trek would have had a pass, at least for a few years, which means J.J. Abrams would be open. Maybe we get a J.J. Abrams Iron Man movie, which in my opinion just wouldn't have been the same at all. I don't think it would have taken off the same way. I think it would have been a cool movie, but
Yeah.
I don't think it would have been, a catalyst to what happened. Yeah, exactly. So many factors, I just alluded to this, many factors went into why this movie didn't do well. A lot of it had to do with, a lot of people blamed the marketing. And I can't help but agree with it to some extent, because when I see a movie called John Carter, that does nothing for me. That sounds like a biopic of a historical figure. It's like if a movie came out today called like David Williams, it's like, I'm not going to watch that.
Yeah.
But if it was David Wallace and it was some weird spin-off of David Wallace from The Office doing weird stuff, I might be into that.
I'm on board.
Yes, Michael, what is so urgent?
David, guess who I am sitting here dressed as?
I'm not going to guess. You could tell me or I will hang up.
I will give you a hint. His last name is Christ. He has the power of flight.
Yeah, or sure. But
Sure.
Moving on.
Appeasing Tyler. That should be a segment. Matt appeases Tyler.
Sure.
Sure.
Matt tries to get Tyler to stop talking. Did you just say Thor? Non sequitur? Just throw a Thor in there to get me to be quiet?
Thor, Tyler. Yeah.
Thor?
It's the reset word. Thor. Bring it back.
That's my Winter Soldier. It snaps you back into.
Yeah.
But it was funny because like they tossed around different names for this movie, and I feel like the name is the beginning of the marketing problem. I don't know what the other stuff was, but they didn't advertise that it was like an Edgar Rice Burroughs, source material. There's a lot of things they didn't reference. They didn't highlight. What was the other thing they didn't highlight? There were some weird choices in the trailer. Like apparently they put a Led Zeppelin song in the trailer. It's like, this is kind of a disconnect. But the one thing that I thought was kind of funny was the studio had previously done a movie called Mars Needs Moms, and it bombed as well.
Yeah.
And their takeaway was that people didn't like Mars in the title. But what I don't understand is maybe people don't like moms in the title. You decided Mars was the problematic word there? I don't know.
Yeah, that's strange.